I'm impressed with your situation on the side of the road, and you can hear you, you can see you. It's good.
We're about to start hearing cars in the background. There goes one.
Nope, didn't even hear it.
Yeah, Zoom actually. So I sound record my podcast both on GarageBand, but then also on Zoom. And Zoom is great at not picking up background noise versus other sound.
Ah,
So Zoom is very good at not at like if it's kind of peripheral, it doesn't.
yeah, nice. Okay, I'm tracking down John here. Promote to panelist. There we go.
Yeah, so the reason we let all of you eager beavers in early is because our panelists were stuck in the attendee space.
Yeah.
So there
John,
it is. It's on mute, but he made it, Jonathan.
What's up, guys?
hi, how's it going?
Doing great. Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Good. You're calling in from New York, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Up here for the next couple days. I like that you got the Nestment logo, no Bilt logo.
Oh, I know, but well, Nestment sponsored this episode.
Ah,
I don't know if I asked Bill. I should have asked you too. But yeah, we'll talk about Bill though.
awesome.
But
We have
our sponsor guest is not here yet. So sorry, what were you saying, Robbie?
saying, do we have Niles here yet? I guess not. Well, I can launch into
Here he
our
is.
little preamble. Oh, here he comes.
No, he's in. I don't know why people didn't have sometimes Zoom, I try. I probably didn't even send people out the panelist link. Sometimes it's user error, sometimes I do think it's Zoom, but here we go. We're all here.
Wow, that's cool that you guys put up the logo. That's really good.
Yeah. Robbie, do you want to kick us off or do you want me too? Okay.
Yeah, I will kick us off. Cool. Now that y'all are both here, uh, this episode should be good. We're gonna delve into alternative paths to achieving homeownership, focusing on the concept of co-buying. And so, very pleased today to be joined by Jonathan Lawless, head of homeownership for Bilt Rewards, and Niles Lichtenstein, CEO of Nestment. And as many of you can see in our background here, a big thank you to Nestment for sponsoring today's show. Nestment is a home co-buying platform that makes real estate a reality, opens the door to homes, and with ownership wealth for a new generation. The co-buying platform, powered with proprietary data, makes it easy for groups to purchase real estate together, and a thoughtful partner ecosystem augmented by extensive educational resources support them along the way. Hopefully by the end of today's show, everybody will want to visit nestment.com for more information. So, Kristin, can you give our audience a background on why you wanted Jonathan and Niles today?
Okay, I'm so excited about this episode. We cannot be talking about mortgages with millennials without talking about co-buying and home sharing models. So, and I can't think of two people that would be better fit for this conversation other than John and Niles. And I myself have purchased a tenancy in common, which is a type of co-buying kind of model. And so it's something I'm really passionate about and helping make homeownership more affordable and also accessible to millennials. So yeah, let's start with just having each of you talk about, you know, your role in that space and what your companies do around that as well. Niles, let's start with you.
Sure. Hey, thank you all for having me. I've been really excited about this conversation. Huge fan of what you all are doing, Kristin and Robbie. So yeah, Nestment, we help millennial and Gen Z buyers pool their capital together and make real estate a reality. We do that and focused on kind of three different types of co-buying. The first is what we call a term that we're coining called shift. So second home is the first time buying, right? So we have a lot of folks who may not be able to afford where they work and live. That there's quite a few folks, or don't know exactly where they're going to live, and they're young and they want to start off, and they want to start with a investment property to start to build equity and not miss out on that period of time. So their second second home becomes their first home. So they pull their capital and purchase a long-term rental property or a short-term rental property that they can visit and enjoy the benefits of having. Our second group is what we call primary multi-unit. So the ability to be able to live in the place where you may work and want to reside, but also be able to afford it through buying a 2 to 4 unit building, right? So you have the opportunity to live in one or multiple. We have, groups of 3 or 4 couples, families going in together, which is kind of cool. And then the last is around parent and child and helping, people, multi-generational groups get together and help them share and really, this is not anything new we're bringing to, frankly, these are old traditions actually in a lot of cultures, but we're just trying to create an easier path forward for it.
Okay. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and interest in this space, and then of course what you're doing over at Bilt.
Yeah, happy to. Great to see you guys. Good to see you again, Niles. Niles and I were just on a rooftop in New York.
Yeah, we were.
My background has been in housing. I spent 20 great years at Fannie Mae with some amazing people. Ran product there for a while and have always been really fascinated about housing innovation, which is why I've been really drawn to this space and drawn to Bilt in general. Let me say a few words about Bilt just so you kind of know what we do. So Bilt, we have an audience of renters, and our motto is that we make paying rent rewarding. We want renters to get something back for paying rent. We want it also to be a stepping stone to getting into home ownership. And so the way to think about our company is I often use the analogy of your airline. So if you fly Delta, when you take a flight, you get Delta Sky Miles. Sort of the same analogy applies to us, except the version of flights for us is you live in one of our properties, and we've partnered with about 80 of the largest multifamily operators out there. So that represents about 4 million units across the United States. And if you live in one of these properties, you're actually making your rental payment through our technology, and we give you points every time you make your rent payment on time. And not only that, but we also offer you the ability to furnish your rental data to the credit bureaus, so your rent is also improving your credit score. So it's as simple as that. You pay rent, you earn rewards. But we've also made it possible to earn a lot more rewards. So we've built this new program. We call it our Neighborhood Rewards program, where renters in their local area can go to grocery stores, to restaurants. They can use Lyft or gas stations, pharmacies. And these local places in the neighborhood, instead of trying to create their own bespoke loyalty program or give a discount, they basically are giving away Bilt points. And so you can go shopping in your neighborhood. Now, not only are you earning points and rent, but you're also earning it in your local neighborhood as well. And then the last thing I'll mention, just like if you're flying Delta, you can also get a Delta Amex. So for our prime renters, they can apply for our Bilt MasterCard. It has no annual fee, and there's no transaction cost when you use it to pay rent, which any other credit card, you're going to pay a huge fee to use your credit card. For us, there's no transaction costs, and you get a point for every dollar on rent you spend. And that's not limited to people that live in our properties. Any renter anywhere can get the Bilt MasterCard and earn points on their rent. So if you or anybody knows a renter, especially in some of these high cost markets, they absolutely should be getting the Bilt MasterCard to earn all those rewards. So all of this matters because our points are really significant now. We now have the most valuable point in the entire loyalty ecosystem, which is really quite an impressive accomplishment for such a young company to sort of outpace the likes of Amex and Chase Sapphire. So you can use our points for things like travel. We're one-on-one relationships with almost every airline, hotel. You can use it directly on Amazon. And what gets really exciting is our points are also available to be used towards a down payment on a home. So anyway, so that kind of builds out the full model. Lots of ways to earn points on the platform. You're building your credit, you're building your down payment. And ultimately what we're trying to do is help renters get into homeownership, which, as you know, is really hard now, which is why we've been sort of looking for alternative ways to sort of provide advice to our renters on finding ways into home ownership. And Nestment has been, an incredible partner in this. We sent a lot of Bilt members to Nestment who have successfully now entered into home ownership by co-buying with somebody else. So we surveyed our renters, and we were shocked at the number who considered co-buying, considered buying their second home first. I mean, over 60% on both of those questions. So we knew there'd be a real market for, the things like Nestment is offering.
Yeah, so this conversation actually started from a comment that you left in a previous episode about co-ownership and just some of the like how some of the questions around that. And I would love for you to help us introduce to the audience what co-ownership looks like and why that's important to or co-buying looks like and why that's important to affordability for millennials, and kind of introducing that topic.
Niles, you want to tackle that first because you know the look way better
Yeah.
than I do, and I'm happy to add on.
There's a wide variety, right? And maybe both of us take a moment because there's a spectrum of co-buying in terms of how you're thinking about that. There's ways to potentially co-buy with corporate partners. There's ways and institutional capital. There's ways to co-buy with certain programs. So all of those are opportunities that I think people should look at because, obviously we know that the disparity between wage growth and the appreciation on homes is huge. My focus is really on this notion of kind of pooling capital with other individuals, right? Whether they're family or friends or people that or in some cases we're even matchmaking, which is the event that Jonathan and I are at. Actually, a couple matches came out of that, which was really, really interesting. Someone was like, "You should be the Tinder of co-buying." But it kind of, the way that we look at co-buying is it's structured in a few different ways. One is enabling a group to first get aligned, right? So having alignment, you may have already had this conversation with a family or friend before over a bottle of wine, right? Hey, let's get this place together. Or, oh, we travel to these same places all the time. Or I'm tired of paying rent, and we're ready to be homeowners. So all of those conversations happen. Some people don't even know it's an opportunity, but when you get those folks aligned, you start to allow them to one, we have a whole bunch of data on the platform, and that's really important to look at. If you're going to buy an investment property, where are you buying that property? Understanding the forward looking appreciation, understanding the rents in those markets. And then obviously, if you're looking in the place that you're living and you're going to be sharing a primary, just thinking through and understanding what are the things that check off the boxes, right? If anyone's watched Indian Matchmaker, you get 7 out of 10. Right? That's kind of how they. And we have a whole bunch of and I know we're going to be working with First Home IQ on a whole bunch of education around what are some of the alignment elements. So alignment, financial projections. I used to have to build out a whole, and we can go into my background at some point because I've been co-buying for the past 10 years to help make the Bay Area affordable for family and friends and co-buying. And I think I might have been the first house hacker at the age of 13 when my mom, as a single mom, had to find a way to keep our home in the Bay Area. We rented it out to UC Berkeley grad students. So it was I've been around it in some ways of these non-traditional pathways, but after projection around financials, then what's been really important, and Jonathan and I have worked closely on this, is finding the right lenders, right? Finding the right mortgage providers who can understand the situation, who understand co-buying. Typically, you can have 4 co-borrowers on a loan application. There's ways we're looking at extending that too. But being able to bring those folks together, understanding what your budget is, and then we're working with the agent and so forth on finding that specific home, and we help them through that process. In some cases, also building out the entity, and in all cases, building out the operating agreement. So just so everyone is on the same page, and that's what Nestment does. We try to make sure that we have a human touch from beginning to end, but enabled throughout that process in terms of the technology. We feel that people have been talking about this so often. We're doing a primary multifamily workshop. We try to do some hyper local ones, and I'll tell some stories in just a sec of different folks. But we're doing one in the Bay Area, and this just recently, this last week, we closed on a quadplex, a 4-unit. There was 2 wonderful engineers, Black engineers, and they said to me, like, okay, we were told we would go to the best college, you go to a good college, you get a good job, and you can finally afford. And it's 15 years later, and I still can't afford, right? They went to UC Berkeley. One became a mechanical engineer, the other became a computer scientist. And so what was really amazing last week is to walk with them. Because I'm local here, walk to them to their quadplex and see that they were finally able, they're going to move in with their partners into 2 units and then rent out 2 units. So those are the stories that I think are really exciting for us when we think about kind of co-buying and what that means.
Yeah, and just to add another dimension to that, I mean, if you take a step back, I mean, traditionally homes are purchased by somebody has equity, their down payment, and then they go get and debt and finance the rest with the mortgage. But what we've seen with sort of this really tight supply in the market is that you're just now competing with people that just have way more means. And we heard the SHIFT acronym. I'll throw out another acronym. There's sort of the DINKs, the dual income, no kids, or the people who are married and thinking about having a kid soon, or the millennial generation is now kind of moving into that mating and procreating period of life. And you have all these dual income households that are able to afford a lot more because they have 2 sources of income. So if you're a single household or single head of household or the single earner in the household, just way more challenging to compete in this sort of supply starved industry. So what do we do? Well, the idea is like try to divide up ownership of the home to make it more affordable. And co-buying is, in my mind, a very practical and I think a very lifestyle familiar one for a lot of people. Many of us have roommates when we grow up, right? A lot of a lot of different cultures like sort of support multi-generational housing. That's very common. And so this idea of co-buying with people that makes a ton of sense. But we've just seen a sort of proliferation of models that have basically said you don't have to be the only person that's putting equity into this home. You could have another entity that sort of becomes a co-investor with you. And there's just a lot of really interesting models. And what that does is enable somebody who doesn't have the means today to compete in this absurd market to be able to compete and actually get into home ownership earlier than they otherwise would be.
Yeah, I just was having a conversation with the folks at Freddie, and I saw the stat that not only is the, typically we were like 1.6 million in terms of lack of supply, but if you take the folks that I think FHFA just talked about, if you take the folks that are locked in because they're at such a low interest rate, which I don't think we'll get back to that low interest rate again, that there's another 1.2 million, right? So now we're getting close to 3 million in this gap. So even if rates go down a little bit in demand, you're not going to see housing prices really retreat, at least in my mind, in the near term, right? So at some point there might be an interesting supply shift, right, with generationally, but right now and over the next 10 years, I think you're going to continue to run into that. So finding demand side solutions is, to what Jonathan's talking about, is what we're really thinking about here. The other thing that I think is so important psychologically, this is what's interesting about the shift model. I take an example that we have on the site with Selena and Wade. They're older millennials, professionals in Brooklyn. They've been looking to buy for a while. They finally said, let me just buy a place up in Hudson Valley that they can get away to that feels like a home, but they can also rent and offset. And why I said feels like a home and the psychology of it, there's something really important about feeling that sense of ownership and that we're finding. And, B of A comes out with their study like every 3-4 years, and home ownership always beat kids and marriage, and this was interesting that it's the first time that it actually beat career fulfillment. Like people wanted home ownership more than career fulfillment, kids and marriage, right? And that was really interesting and surprising, but also very understandable.
Yeah, wow, that's so interesting. Robbie, I'll let you jump in. I have some follow-up questions.
Well, we had a question in the chat, and I don't want to get too much into the nitty gritty here, but John asked, do you recommend a buy-sell agreement between co-buyers?
Yeah, so we have a number of different types of agreements that we basically spent the last couple of years collecting templated types of agreements for different situations, and so we have a number of them have different, and we can feel free to reach out to me, Niles at Nestment. We can go deeper into this, but a number of them have unique opportunities of how you sell in terms of giving first right of refusal to other owners, having a time period where you can share it to privately to family and friends. We're actually on the Nestment platform enabling you to do this more privately and also potentially putting it on a public exchange to allow for some level of liquidity. And then there's also a certain set of hangman clauses that say, hey, if we can't reach certain agreements, we all sell it. Or if the property has appreciated by a certain amount, we just sell it at that point. So there are some nuances there that are interesting. On the investment side too, what we're working on, what we've worked on with lenders, and a lot of folks don't know that you can do this with qualified mortgages, is actually transfer into an LLC. So in a number of cases, there's some tax benefits with that as well, but transferring into an LLC then allows for a little bit more movement in terms of, even things like the ownership and equity percentages to be more dynamic, right? Roof caves in, not everyone can afford at that point, and things like that. So, but yeah, reach out to me in the chat or Niles at Nestment, and we can go deeper.
Jonathan, any comments? Or I got another question lined up if not.
No, that's great. Yeah.
Cool. Are there common misconceptions that you think are worth addressing today? Or it's kind of like this, it's too good to be true. Kind of take us through peel back the curtain a little bit for us.
Yeah, I mean, and I know, Jonathan, you've seen all different types of forms of this. I think the one that comes out, you probably read lots of articles about this, is just obviously people don't like this notion of mixing money with friends and family, right? So and so I think what we've tried to really enable is coming at it from the perspective of, hey, things are going to happen. How do we become a third party that takes the emotion out of it, right? How do we become a platform that, I know what it's like very personally. I bought my first triplex with cousins, right? Like we know, that situation, like, and what's amazing is they thought they'd never be able to afford the Bay Area. And I had a little capital from a previous startup and put that down. And next thing you know, like 9 years later, we refinance and now they have checks to buy their primary. And that's what we're kind of hoping for. They weren't born with stock portfolios or anything else in that case. So but yes, I think, the friends and family issues can always come up. We've hired an advisor who actually works on family mediation and friend mediation to help us understand what are the things, but being a third party can help with that. Having very clear lines of delineation, best practices, like we make sure that each of our groups put 3 to 6 months in a joint account that almost never gets touched, right? Because the last thing you want is a pandemic or someone losing their job and that creating fear. And then there's the focus. We're realigning our focus. And this is, for me, something that's been really important, which has been around how do we build community, right? It's not just about, there's a financial necessity that's pushing us this way, but also in a world where we're feeling constantly isolated. Like I own a building here. It kind of is a Nestment. We own it with another couple. We've actually been thinking about buying a fourplex with 4 of us because we each have 2 kids, and 2 working families with 2 kids is really tough, right? So we came up with our plan that, one weekend out of the week, the other couples take the 2 kids and we go off, right? For just like some reconnection time. I only bring that up because there's actually these notions of rethinking not only how we can financially afford, but also, how we can kind of live together in this interesting way. But yeah, there are those things. There's also other too good to be true. When you put something into an LLC, right? For instance, if you're going to refinance it, you have to put it back into the names. There are still some things that I think we're actively working out to make a lot of that process a little bit more streamlined. So there are things at the margins and the nuances, but overall, frankly, at least you can talk to the folks who've gone through Nestment. It's been the difference between owning or not. So.
Yeah, I'll add one experience that we had at Fannie Mae when we developed the Home Ready product. When we first launched the product, we had a feature that basically allowed a person that was living in the house who made significant income, who was not on the mortgage, would be able to sort of document that they were actually making income to help the person qualify. And so again, this is a very typical thing. We see in multi-generational households where we have multiple income earners. And the idea was, well, let's help the person qualify if there are other people living in the house and contributing to household expenses. And what we were really surprised about, and I think this is really important for those in the lending community that are listening, was that nobody used it. And maybe one reason, typical of anything that the GSEs do, there's a lot of shitty complexity in terms of how it got rolled out. But actually, the thing that we found was more of an issue is that when we talk to people, this idea of somebody else being a part of the home on the mortgage in some way, created issues on both sides. On the side of the homeowner, it was like, whoa, I want this to be mine. This is my home. I don't want anybody else to be included in this. And then the other side is like, wait, am I on this mortgage? And like, there's a lot of confusion there between the two parties. And a lot of that was just cultural. It was sort of the pride of having your own home. I think one thing that really needs to be overcome is this idea that co-buying is somehow lesser than, right? It's a negative thing that you're doing because you can't afford it on yourself by yourself. And the reality is, to Niles's point, like homes are so expensive right now, it shouldn't be viewed as lesser than. So getting people comfortable with the arrangement that it is a meaningful way to get into home ownership early, to actually have the benefits of the wealth creation of home ownership, it's really important. So anyway, I think there is a lot to overcome with regards to that sort of relationship, but I think we'll see that slowly start to change as the perception changes of what it takes to really own a home these days.
Yeah.
I would think that, oh, sorry, go ahead, Niles.
No, go for it, Robbie.
And Kristin, I know you want to say something. I have one more quick follow-up to them. I would think that building the credibility of these products is also something that's been tough. Obviously, when Fannie Mae rolls something out, it's like, cool, there's credibility behind it that way. But maybe the better question would be, how do you get the word out and how do you let people kind of come to their own conclusions that this is a viable, real, solid product?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great point. I think, I look at things as like a 5-year arc kind of when I build like a new company. And in 2022 was really research and development. 2023 was building our ecosystem and platform for all the research that we did. And we started very much with like, we put a landing page up and did some Instagram ads and did a LinkedIn campaign. And we were just blown away by how many people were like, are you retargeting me? How did you know I'd been thinking about this? Right. So that was interesting. And then we just listened to them as much as possible, trying to understand what the friction points were. And we even started with nothing but Google Sheets and duct tape before we built the platform out, because just to see people going through. I think one of the things is the financial draw was so, like, everything is about incentive and reward versus work, right? That you put into it, and the reward was so high. But I think you're right. This next stage of this year, and this is why the Bilt relationship has been so incredible. And I thank Jonathan all the time for this, because what it did was it provided, what you're talking about, Robbie, just a source of credibility, right? That hey, Bilt members, we've done our checks. Nestment, is a good company. And and that brought people in. And then once people were there, they're like, oh, okay, I get it. This makes sense. So I think we're gonna, actively be doing more and more of those types of partnerships, which I think is really, really important to build that credibility. And then really this year is building the movement. Next year is scaling the movement. In building the movement, our goal is 100 stories that we can tell, right? 100 stories. And they're amazing because they're everything from friends to single moms coming together to so many just different forms, multifamilies. And so when people start to recognize, oh, that can be me too, right? Then I think that gets some power. And then what you hope is that you can actually get towards the structural change, right? And it's not an easy route, but the other good thing is these things take time. So we're working on, for instance, while you have your agreements for off-ramping, we want it to happen within the platform to make life a lot easier. Like if I want to sell my share, or, working with lenders to see one day, Jonathan and I talk about this, one day being able to have multiple loans per home if you're co-buying rather than one loan that you're all a part of. But it does take, it feels like this is the right moment for that convergence. And we're seeing that, but yeah.
And I'll add, I mean, every innovator like Niles kind of faces this challenge. I mean, so many great companies have amazing ideas, but they just fail to find distribution. It's really, really hard. Direct to consumer is really hard. Lots of companies try that, put out, Facebook ads, whatever they're trying to do, and just it doesn't deliver the traction they want. In our industry, realtors and lenders are often called upon to be sort of that word of mouth to consumers about things, but they're overwhelmed with how complicated it is to do a normal loan. Adding more things to their plate gets really hard. And as people have gone to employers as HR benefits, but all of these paths are really, really hard to get to the consumer in a meaningful way that they actually understand it. I think it's going to take a ton of time, to Niles' point. I mean, one of the great things about being at Bilt is that we've built an incredible distribution channel. Rewards are the oldest form of gamification, right? Like, we have a great way of getting people's attention and focus on things that otherwise they might not listen to. And so we just have a real opportunity to kind of make renters aware of some of these options. But I think this is a big challenge, and we'll see, over the next few years, if these ideas really get enough traction where, I'll give an example. So one of the prior companies I worked for was called Pathway Homes, which was a shared ownership platform. The idea being, so you're a co-buyer with another company. And this is actually a very common way of buying homes in the UK. They have this sort of part own, part rent structure as part of government program, where the government owns the land, or government, I forget what they're called, housing associations, and then somebody buys the structure, and so you're paying rent and you're paying mortgage on your structure. But that sort of reached a place of commonality where everyone knows what you mean when you say part buy, part rent. Some of these other programs that we have in the States, shared equity, shared ownership, I mean, they just haven't gotten to the point where people have talked enough about it, where it's common enough in discussions where people get comfortable with it. So anyway, it'll take time, as if housing continues to remain such an impossibility for this huge generation of people that really want to move into homes. I think some of these alternatives will really get into the mainstream sort of discussions about how to buy a home.
I think these conversations too lead people to feel that they can have a conversation, even think about homeownership. Whereas, like, we just did a survey with 1,000 millennial and Gen Z consumers and found that over half said they didn't think homeownership would be accessible to the next generation. And so, there's just, and, all of us are bombarded with memes in our new, or at least I am in my newsfeed, about like homeownership is a joke. This is completely inaccessible. And even just thinking about this allows us to then start making a plan and thinking like, oh, okay, well, maybe if this is possible, let's really look at my finances. Let's really look at making a path towards homeownership. And that's what kind of excited me about, there's a program in California rolling out, I can't even remember what it's called, but it's where you are buying with the, Niles, do you know what I'm leading into?
No, exactly. Now it's slipping from my mind, but yeah, it went so fast. Like,
Dream for
oh,
All.
did it? Is it gone?
it's gone now.
Yeah,
It's
it's
Dream
called
for
the
All
Dream for
program.
All
Heard
program.
about it.
Yeah. Oh, good, Brad. Yeah. The Dream for All program. Yeah.
Yeah, it's Dream for All. Yeah. And so it kind of felt that same way, where you're buying with a portion, like they're getting the benefit of, they're paying for the down payment, but then they get the benefit in the sale, right? Like they get 20% or whatever it is, a portion of that down payment back on the sale. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting. It also felt like, oh, is this something I should be nervous about? I mean, and I think most consumers, like I have friends right now who I was saying, well, let's look at different models. You guys all, there's a big house of my friends who live together and they want to keep renting because they enjoy living together. And I'm like, there's other options here, but and they also feel that same way. Like they make good money, but they think there's no way they could buy a home. And so I was kind of introducing this idea of co-buying with them. And I think people automatically clam up a little bit thinking like, there's something that is going to go wrong here. And I think we talked about it a little bit around the contract with friends and family. But what are some things that people should watch out for when it comes to, or help to protect themselves around when they start thinking about co-buying?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when as mentioned, like from the beginning, I think there's first we have alignment questionnaires and things like that, because the worst is when you've gone through the whole path and there wasn't really alignment to begin with, right? And so having that alignment is there. Then down when you get closer and you're in contract, or you're getting closer to purchasing, having the operating agreement set up and things like that. So you have those protections along the way. I think also making sure, and then the best practices, like taking out what are the psychological barriers. Like what we found was really fascinating was the psychological barrier of going in together not knowing what was in an agreement was the number one, I would say, drawback or fear of folks. And then we started with just a Google form and a decision tree. And so we asked at the end of that decision tree, how do you feel now? And almost universally, people within 30 to 45 minutes said, we feel a ton better, basically. And so that's really, it's an interesting kind of way to look at that. I think also there's obviously some unique programs that have come up. The Fannie Mae program, where 5% down on an owner occupied 2 to 4 unit, I think is huge. And we have a number of people. Just had two women friends purchase a single family, but it had an ADU, so it ended up qualifying. And I think that was exciting because they have a home together, and it's about a mile from SoFi Stadium. And it's great, kind of that typical LA Spanish villa with some great hedges and things like that. But it's also got an ADU for rent. So I think just the opportunities that it opens for people is hopefully that there's enough of the good that kind of will outweigh, and then you can kind of minimize the bad. We can't eliminate those things too. So it is a somewhat of a change of thought. But I think the biggest thing we can do right now is just continue to tell the stories of folks who are making this happen, and continuing to build that movement. Yeah.
Yeah, and now maybe to expand a little bit on your question, Kristin, which is a really good one. When you sort of think about this continuum from being a renter to being a full owner, right? What are these new sort of points that are kind of being created along the spectrum so people can ladder from renting up to owning, and then in some cases from owning down to renting? And in the case of co-buying, where it's you and a party that in some ways you're safer, assuming you like the person that you're buying with, right? But now when you introduce a third party, it introduces all sorts of risk, especially if it's the private market. And so some of those points and some of the things to be cautious of, the place closest to renting are some of these lease to own programs where you have an option to buy the home that you're renting over time, which for a private investor, what they're doing is they're basically creating a single family rental portfolio. They're making money off of your rent and then giving you an option to buy with some home price appreciation built in there. But the math has to pencil out for them. So the things to be cautious there is like, are you getting charged a fair amount of rent? Or are they taking the option value they're giving and just jacking up the rent and creating an SFR portfolio with huge yields and really no benefit to the consumer? In a lot of these programs, we've seen very small turnover from renting to owning when the option comes available. And some have been really good and very successful at that. On the other side of the spectrum, per the California Dream for All, these are sort of equity share where a third party basically owns a portion of your equity, and in exchange for that gets some share of your appreciation down the road. Now you're the owner, you've just given up some percentage of your home, and then giving up some share of that future appreciation. Now, depending on how much appreciation the investor takes from you, it can be a good deal or a bad deal. And if they end up taking all of your appreciation, it just completely defeated the purpose of becoming a homeowner. And so that's the thing to be cautious of that. Now, California, being a public entity, has very, very fair consumer-friendly terms in terms of the appreciation that they recapture. So that's obviously a very safe one. But in other private market solutions, that's just something that can be a potential concern. And then recently I've seen a huge proliferation of this sort of fractional buying or sort of co-buying with an investor where the home gets split, per like the model I talked about in the UK or what we had developed at Pathway. And again, you've got a private investor who's partaking in ownership with you, and you just have to make sure that they're not taking a disproportionate share of the benefits relative to what you want. Now, of course, they're going to have to get paid. It's the private market. They're not going to do this for free. But it's just, are they getting paid too much? And if they are getting paid, are you getting some benefits, right? So are you really getting some of the benefits of being a renter and an owner that fit your lifestyle or not? And so anyway, good call out, Kristin. We've got to be really cautious about these models, but when done right, they really do kind of expand the options that people have along that continuum.
One thing I'll mention, if it's okay, just because I think, Jonathan, what you brought up was important too. I mean, that is some of the benefits of, I know there's also benefits of working with kind of private market capital and things of that nature, but with family and friends, there tends to be a little bit of what I call a found money situation, where it's a little bit more, let's call it altruistic, while we're all, building wealth and building community at the same time. And there's actually a joy from that. And there's actually something that's there. I think the other interesting thing is our groups, there were models where they're, eighths, tenths, et cetera. Our groups are typically actually, our average is like 2.7, meaning like, really between 2 and 4 people, because it makes a huge difference to share it with the expense with 1 or 2 people, right? Now you could have 3 couples, right, buying a threeplex or something of that nature, or something like, but that I kind of point that out. And then the last thing I'd say is, to the point of benefits, there's all of these tax benefits around real estate, right? That are not taken by folks, or not realized in that calculation, in that calculus. And so it's been interesting when we always kind of, we have a CPA portion or partner that we work closely with, but it's interesting to take people through not only the ownership and replacing rent, but also when they see some of the tax benefits available to them, that becomes really interesting for them as well.
Yeah, and there was a thing in the chat I was going to just quickly respond to around sort of fractional buying of second homes, because I think it's a useful point. So the company that's gotten a lot of attention in this space is Picasso, who has super high-end vacation homes that can get split among 6 to 8 different buyers. And what they're effectively doing is taking these homes and putting them into an LLC, and then dividing up shares of the LLC. And the challenge with that model, which I think is, very relevant to something Niles mentioned before, is that you can't go and get a mortgage on a fractional share of an LLC. You have to go get a very different type of loan. Now that, Picasso's been working to get some lending made available to their customers, but I think that's one of those things that, the industry is just not ready for some of these new models, because there's just no comfort in financing it. So like, I really think it would be very powerful for there to be a conforming loan that could be used to co-buy a home. Niles's model would be so much smoother if each individual could qualify for their own mortgage. It would be a game changer, but in a lot of these cases that financing doesn't exist. So we just have to find ways around it, unfortunately. But that's kind of what I've seen in that second home and a lot of these other sort of fractionalizing tokenization of homes. You turn a home into a security, and suddenly a home is no longer mortgageable, in that shape. Tenancy in common is mortgageable, but not by a conforming loan. LLC not mortgageable. So anyway, this is just another challenge that I think is interesting in our space.
Yeah, and I think the more demand we show for it, like, it's actually great that we have that ability on the conventional loans to have up to 4 co-borrowers, because like I said, our groups tend to be like, it's much more significantly affordable when you're sharing it with 2, 3, at most 4 folks. So that's been really helpful, but ultimately liquidity will reach certain issues if you don't go the route eventually of having more kind of conforming co-buying loans. So there's ways we get around that for now, but like, and I think it still benefits folks greatly, but the system wasn't built for it. And so we're now actively, I think the good news though is people are coming. Last year was not a great year for real estate, but actually what was interesting about innovating during that time is everyone kind of came to the table and said, what can we do differently? And we're still seeing that, especially, with on the domestic agenda, at least in this country, housing affordability being probably third or fourth on the agenda when it was maybe 14th or 15th in the past, right?
So I want to quickly, we have a couple good questions in the chat. I know Kristin wants to ask one more question before we go. So I'm going to kind of go dealer's choice to you guys. If you open up the Q&A, there's one on clarifying if it's possible to divide the co-purchasing between a family member friend and your LLC. There's a question about cost to co-buyers, and there's a question about if borrowers can use a realtor of choice if they use Nestment, and if the realtor pays a referral fee. Maybe you can rapid fire through them. I don't know. Floor is open.
Sure. Okay. I mean, I can just go through real quickly. Right now there's on the transaction side, there's no cost to the co-borrowers. Obviously because of RESPA, we can't take money from lenders for leads, but we pass on all the savings to the co-buyers. And we do have some marketing services agreements that help us monetize. We do get a referral fee from the realtor, either if the realtor is bringing us a group. What we found early on, and I found this as a co-buyer, is not all realtors really love groups because they fell apart, right? People would come to them. And so what realtors have really liked is that they'll actually bring a group to us. We get them aligned, get them ready, get them pre-approved, and then bring it back to the realtor. And then the realtor will pay a referral fee on that. Obviously, a lot changing in that space right now. We get a lot of our folks who haven't even, I mean, 84% of our groups are first-time home buyers, 62% are professionals of color or first-gen immigrants. I just mentioned that because it's an interesting thing. These are not just people buying, so these are really first-time home buyers. But there is no cost to the co-buyer. We make our money from the ecosystem in supporting them. And then, yeah, you can definitely divide the co-purchasing between a family member and friend and your LLC. So you can bring an LLC into the co-buying situation as well. And we just have to work through kind of what the right lending would be for that at that point. So yeah, hopefully that covers some of the questions. And I'm really happy to take more questions and connect with folks. There's so much evolving in this space, and it's been so exciting. And some of the best ideas have come from the community. And, you know, we've seen a lot of this be very community driven in terms of, you know, we don't know everything either. We know we don't know a lot. And so people will come to us with really novel, amazing ideas. And then fortunately, we've had the right advisors and partners like Jonathan and so forth to help think what's the right model. And now we've accumulated a number of models that we've productized them.
Yeah, and I'll just as a just a shout out for what Niles has built. I mean, if you get a chance to demo the platform, it's really amazing, and it's been fun to watch the stories. And a lot of people who go into it thinking they're going to co-buy just end up buying homes themselves using the platform because it's just so friendly to help figure out where to get a home. And you know, Niles has done a great job of building something that just is super consumer friendly, makes the entire process really easy. I think he wasn't expecting all the variations of types of people that would be coming onto the platform. So I highly recommend anyone who's interested to take a quick run through and a demo of what they built. It's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, these are great ways to end, but I did want to ask really quick. So there was a comment on a LinkedIn post about the competitive nature of this and how, you know, we are especially in places like California where the market is super competitive. Is it, and Niles, you started to speak to this, is it difficult to come as a co-buyer and still, you know, beat out other offers?
Yeah, so I mean, typically most of I think where competitiveness comes in is what contingencies you're willing to waive and how much money you're coming to the game with, right? So I think it hasn't actually impacted because still is one mortgage, one lending, right? It hasn't really impacted like a seller saying, "Oh, I don't want to sell this to a group," right? I think what's more been the situation is, and sometimes this is to their benefit or not, but you oftentimes have people co-buying because affordability is an issue. So if they're only able to put 15 to 20% down, they may lose the deal based on 30% or 40% or all cash, right? So I think that's become we are actively obviously working with opportunities to help co-buyers go all cash. There's actually also an opportunity that you can go above that 20% because you're co-buying with other people, right? So you're able to more comfortably putting 10% more down for 4 people means putting 2.5% more down, right? Which is a very different equation. So, but it hasn't necessarily I mean, there's competition everywhere. I mean, we made offers in 15 different states last month, right? And we're definitely starting to see the competition start up again. So it's been interesting.
That's awesome. Well, I really wish we had more time. There's so much more we could talk about around co-buying and getting into that space. And then Jonathan, there's a ton that you're doing that just is, you know, bringing, I think, an evolution around homeownership, especially for millennials and first-time homebuyers. So we'll have to have you back on. And yeah, thank you guys again. Robbie, is there anything else you wanted to add? I know we're at time, but would love
A big thank you to Nestment for sponsoring today's show. I apologize for the shadows. I ran out of gas in a small town. I'm trying to car, so
I like that.
I'm
I love
excited
that.
to get to the pump here. Yeah, wish me luck.
We'll have our fingers crossed. Well, thank you so much. And the partnership with Bilt and Jonathan has been amazing, and I think we can all grow this movement together. So I'm excited.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Bye.